Hello everyone and welcome. Sit back, relax, make a cup of tea or whatever you like to drink and get ready for new stories from Yellowcat. Send your own favorite stories in the comments below and maybe they'll be in our new video. So subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed yet. Let's get started. Have you ever stood up in the middle of a work shift and left your job? Why if so? Part 2. I'm a senior manager of hospitality. I took the job as manager of a restaurant that was offered to me. In my first week on the job, I was put in charge of the whole building, which included a bar open late at night. I said no and told them I wasn't gonna do that. These people hired a bar manager. The second week, he got so drunk that I had to cover for him. It was clear that he was fired. I slept in for him 5 nights, and I worked 13-hour shifts every day without getting paid extra. It was late at night, so I went back to the owners and told them I was no longer closing the late-night bar. I also asked to be reimbursed for the taxi fare. Every night at 4 a.m., I pay about 40 euros for a taxi to get home. They wouldn't, so I told them I wouldn't close the late-night bar anymore. They began to bother me badly. Everyone who works there hates their job because the whole place is toxic. When I went to the cocktail bar one time, I saw 2 brooms and a mop lying on the floor in the middle of the bathroom. No one was there. I put it away and went back to work at the restaurant. After 30 minutes, a big woman yells at me in the middle of service in a busy restaurant, telling me I should never touch her broom and mop again or she will hurt me. I was amazed. I had never seen her before. The cleaner had gone to clean somewhere else, so the mop and broom were left alone for more than an hour. The owners knew about the problem but did nothing about it. They also told me that they told her not to leave the bathroom. She looked bad, but she wouldn't give up. This is a great spot where you can get a cocktail for 16 euros. In the 4th week, they gave me a new contract with 47 hours a week instead of the 40 hours a week I was working before. I was also put on 11 months of probation and my job title was changed from restaurant manager to building assistant manager. I was also given extra duties like managing 2 restaurants and the late night cocktail bar. My agreed upon salary did not change. I wouldn't sign and said I would keep the first contract. The owner started to pick on me, but I stayed 3 more weeks until I found a great job. I quit in a meeting where 2 bullies were trying to break my spirit because they wanted me to work more hours than agreed and run the whole business for the same pay, which I wasn't interested in doing. I stood up and told them I didn't want to work with their company any longer and that the salary they were paying me was fair because of my experience and skills. I also told them I couldn't do miracles because their whole business was almost bankrupt because of bad management, a toxic workplace, overpriced bad food, and an old run-down building that no one wanted to go to anymore. It has never felt so good to leave this crazy, toxic, and crazy place. From where I am now to the same quarter last year, my sales have gone up by 12%. And my team is great. They serve great food and treat customers great. Never been happier. When I was 18, I worked at Jiffy Lube. I worked there for 3 days. I like cars as a hobby. I rebuilt my first motor when I was 17 and did all the maintenance and upgrades on my own car, which I would take to the track when I had the money. Thought it'd be easy to become a lube tech, and it was. That wasn't the problem. I had training on day 1 where a guy tried for an hour to teach me how to read dipsticks. Took an hour because he wouldn't agree on where the full line was. You should aim for the middle of the high and low marks, I told you. He told you to fill up more than the high marks so they can charge you more for the oil. That's when I knew I wouldn't be there for long. On the second day, I got to change the oil. I saw that they had 2 oils at that point, both natural and man-made. You may have seen more than 2 oils if you've ever been to an auto parts store. Weights must be different for motors. The car will run with the wrong weight most of the time, or there wouldn't be any Jiffy Lubes left. But it is terrible for the motor's longevity. Plus, technicians were using synthetic oil in motors that needed conventional oil, which is a big no-no. Third day came. They wanted me to sell the services right away because I was the fastest and smartest tech. Fine with me. This is when things went wrong for me. I was basically following the service advisor around to figure out how their computers work. After every car, I would ask him why he would upsell synthetic oil when the car doesn't need it or something similar. It was always money. Since we get paid on commission, this jerk will take anything that costs more. The last straw was a brand new F-150 with only 3,000 miles on it. This was its first oil change. It was driven by a woman who said it was her husband's. I still don't understand why she didn't go to the dealership for the first oil change, which is usually free for most brands. In case you didn't know, coolant now comes in a lot of different colors. Most of the time it's green, but I've seen blue, pink, and orange coolant in this Ford. He pops the hood, sees the coolant, and tells her it's bad. I follow this jerk out to the truck. He shows her the cheap $10 a gallon coolant that doesn't have any of the additives that Ford puts in their coolant for this motor and tells her orange means it's burned. It should be green like this. I told him it was a Ford and that the color was fine. I told him I was new, but he said he had worked there for years and that orange was burned. He then got her to flush it with their stupid coolant while using the wrong oil weight. I could only picture my angry husband coming home and demanding to know who messed up his brand new truck. I went to the bathroom through the back door, got in my car, and didn't look back. I meant to give that guy some time off. F that guy. He probably didn't do anything, but I hope his husband beat the crap out of him. I worked the 12-2-2-3 shift at Niagara over the weekend. 2 years of work there. One night, there was only one line running and the computer I was on kept crashing. There were extra bodies, but most of them were just staring at me while I tried to fix it. A maintenance worker swats my hand away from the screen and says, "Don't jog it, you're making it worse," in a very rude and mean way while I'm trying to clear it. I looked at her, thought for a second, and then said, "You know what? I gave up." The girl I taught heard me say that before I left, threw my mic in the locker, and walked away. It was really anger that had been building up for 2 years at that time. My family moved across the country, leaving me to think about things on my own. I was tired of my job. I also asked about moving to days about a month or two before that, and all I got was, "We're talking about it." Wasn't a good time for me, but now that I'm back with my family, things are better than ever. Tell me about an HOA or neighbor who's been a nightmare for you, part 2. A friend of my dad's has a small cabin on a lake. He took care of the earthen dam that controls the lake's water level for many years. No one lives on the other side of the lake from him, and no one has ever offered to help him keep the dam in good shape. Not long ago, a neighborhood was built on the other side of the pond lake and an HOA was created. At this point, the friend of my dad started getting letters from the HOA demanding that the lake water stay at a certain height. The letters were ignored by the friend of my dad's. They even threatened legal action, but never did it. This guy also doesn't do what they say, like when they say he can't keep his boat in his yard. He's had this cabin for more than 30 years, long before this HOA was formed. His house is miles away from the development where this HOA was formed, but they act like they own the whole lake. Not a single person wants to spend a day with him moving rocks to keep the dam in good shape. Someone just built a dock and decided what the water level should be, and all they do is make legal threats that don't go anywhere. I'll tell you about a stupid thing that's happening right now. A farmer sold my ex-wife and her boyfriend a house. It's been years since this house was built. It's on a back road and covers about 2 acres. Their driveway leads right out into that road. In a separate deal with developers, the farmer sold a different piece of land, which was the farm itself. The builders made one of those GD deed-restricted abominations where, well, I'll be blunt, everyone's white, every house costs over $400K, and 90% of the people drive SUVs to work. They all think they're in the country because they're not in the suburbs, and looks are way too important to them. One day, I go over to pick up my kids, and my ex and I are talking. I was going to ask her boyfriend to do some work for me. She tells him, "Don't call him, just email him. He's mad right now." Of course, I was interested, so I had to find out why. The HOA president from the separate development next door had walked over. I mean that he had to walk over a 200-yard by 200-yard empty area that I think is a drain field or something. I'm not an engineer. The point is that there is some space between them. As he wears his khakis, loafers, Land's End vest, and other clothes to try to look snazzy, the HOA guy smiles with his teeth out. Someone told me the tone she used was condescending based on their appearances. My ex was gardening in dirty clothes, and her boyfriend works as a roofer, so he's always dirty. She asked them why they hadn't paid their dues. Her boyfriend laughs and asks if he's serious. The guy then says that if everyone doesn't pay, it's a problem because they need to pay for things like signs, landscaping, snow removal, and so on. So her boyfriend says, WTF, dude, there's no landscaping or signs near my house, and my driveway leads straight to the road, and you've almost certainly never plowed it. No one in their right mind would think that my land is in your subdivision. What the heck are you talking about? The guy must have been angry because he started talking legal nonsense, so they told him to shut up. So it looks like he didn't like my ex-girlfriend and her boyfriend's big storage shed and complained. Even though I don't know everything, that's effing HOAs. They'll go out of their way to F someone they don't like looking at. For once, I have the impression that I have a very interesting story to retort to. My father purchased his home in the year 2004. One of the most compelling selling points was the absence of a homeowners association. It's one of the very few neighborhoods in my town that did not have this problem. 2009, my grandmother passed away, and the money she left behind enabled my father to pay off his mortgage. I'll elaborate on the significance of that in a moment. It was probably 2011 or 2012, but we received a knock on the door asking my father to sign a petition to establish a homeowners association. The petition was for the House Owners Association. It was the first time I ever heard my father curse, and it was when he informed that lady, F no, this house was purchased in 2004 for a number of reasons, the primary one being that I do not want a DHOA. Now get the H off my porch. It's a funny story, but about 3 months later, he received some mail informing him of the newly formed HOA. My father was so furious that he went around the neighborhood and inquired about what they had said to this woman. If there's a lien on the property, it turns out that the Homeowners Association, HOA, does not need to ask the resident or the legal owner of the property when it's formed. So, since most everyone has a mortgage and the mortgage company says yes, we would like to further protect our investment, please form an HOA as fast as you can. Even though the HOA doesn't really accomplish much, my dad keeps bringing it up in conversation. His peach tree was hanging too low over the fence at one point and he was given a fine for it. However, he decided that it would be approximately 2 weeks before he could harvest the majority of the peaches, so he decided to pay the fine. To a large extent, that was the case until the summer of 2014. My father received a warning about our little camper that was parked in the backyard one day completely out of the blue. A camper measuring 14 feet in length has been in our possession for almost as long as I can remember. On a yearly basis during the summer months, we would travel to a different state and spend weekends in the mountains. Quite a few of my most treasured recollections are associated with this thing that we'd been living in for years, but are only now being told to relocate. Thus, my father did it. He moved into the residence of his brother for a period of time. By the time winter arrived in 2016, my uncle was in the process of selling his home. My father came to the conclusion that it was time to move on. Many of our neighbors have trailers in their backyards, and they've been there for years. Who cares? After placing it in the backyard, we received a warning within a week of doing so. All of a sudden, my father was seeing red. My father had determined that the most effective course of action would be to first report all of the neighbors who had trailers, then wait a couple of weeks and inform them about the upcoming board meeting. This resulted in a great deal of success. Almost 100 people show up to this board meeting, many of whom had purchased their house new, with the fact that you could park things in the backyard and the lack of an HOA a huge selling point. As things went from bad to worse, there was not a single person who was happy. In the 20 minutes that followed this board meeting, every single member of the board resigned, leaving only the property manager in their position. Excitedly, my father ran into the room the following morning at approximately 8 o'clock. He had informed me that the HOA had been dissolved and the property manager had resigned from their position. If you want to watch the part 1, click the link here. Thank you for subscribing, the likes, and comments. We're very happy to see you all in the comments too. Thanks for support.